The royal residence was not ready for the silence that followed. One discreet transfer, one treasured tiara collection, and one firm refusal changed the atmosphere inside the palace within moments. Princess Alexandra did not simply entrust the jewels to Catherine. She drew a clear boundary across years of expectation, loyalty, and quiet tension. And when Camilla's request was declined, the surprise did not remain hidden behind palace walls for long. Before we continue uncovering what this truly means for the royal family, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an update. Alexandra held the case with the steady confidence of someone who understood the room would remember every second. Catherine stood before her, calm but aware this was far more than an ordinary gift. A historic tiara collection refers to royal headpieces passed down through generations, carrying family heritage, public significance, and deep trust. That was why the occasion carried such importance. These jewels were more than glittering treasures beneath palace lights. They represented the person considered worthy of preserving the legacy behind them. Catherine accepted the case with both hands, and for a brief moment her grip tightened around it. She immediately recognized the weight of what had just happened. Her growing role within the monarchy had already made her a symbol of stability, continuity, and the future many believed in. Now Alexandra had publicly placed that confidence in her before senior household figures, and the decision delivered a message far stronger than any official announcement. The older generation had looked beyond titles and chosen integrity. Camilla received the news away from the gathering, and she fell silent before the explanation was even complete. The Queen Consort had expected her position beside King Charles to support her expectation of receiving the collection. A claim, simply put, means believing you have the right to something. But Alexandra had not postponed her decision, nor softened it. She had rejected it outright, and that single decision transformed expectation into disappointment. Alexandra understood exactly what her refusal would stir, yet she never stepped back. Catherine noticed it immediately in her expression, the quiet certainty of someone who had measured responsibility against comfort and chosen responsibility. The collection represented far more than precious diamonds. It symbolized trust, tradition, and the silent judgment of those who believed royal history should remain in the hands of the person least likely to turn it into personal competition. Camilla did not raise her voice when the reality became clear. She simply grew colder. That was even more unsettling. Charles would soon find himself expected to respond to a decision he had never publicly announced, while Catherine would have to shoulder a gift that already felt like the beginning of a storm. Before the refusal could grow into a full palace controversy, the people at the center of it first had to face what those jewels truly represented. This had never been only about diamonds. It was about trust. It was about who had earned confidence when the palace corridors were quiet and the cameras were nowhere to be seen. Catherine found herself standing at the threshold of a future she had never tried to claim. Camilla was confronting a rejection she had never imagined possible. And Princess Alexandra had made a choice that resembled less a generous gift and more a royal judgment. Alexandra understood exactly what that judgment would set in motion. She had spent enough years inside the monarchy to know that silence often leaves deeper wounds than raised voices. Her influence mattered because she carried the memory of traditional royal discipline, private family duty, and the unwritten customs that shaped palace life long before every gesture became public spectacle. A royal judgment, in simple words, means a decision that feels final because it comes from someone whose opinion carries lasting family authority. And in that quiet sitting room, her judgment had fallen in Catherine's favor. Catherine remained seated opposite Alexandra with the tiara case resting between them, unable to celebrate what had just happened. The future queen had become the person many palace aides trusted whenever problems threatened to spill beyond royal walls. That mattered because calmness had become its own form of strength. It also mattered because the monarchy needed someone capable of carrying pressure without turning personal hardship into public drama. Catherine looked at the case, then met Alexandra's eyes, quietly asking whether she was completely certain. Alexandra did not answer immediately. She rested one hand gently on the lid, softly spoke Catherine's name, and explained that certain treasures belonged with the person capable of carrying them without making them part of a competition. Catherine asked once more because the weight of the answer unsettled her. She knew Camilla would never interpret this decision as simple tradition. The queen consort would hear only rejection. She would feel as though another door had quietly closed before her. Camilla believed that standing beside Charles had earned her this recognition. And that belief made Alexandra's refusal hurt even more deeply. Recognition, in this case, meant far more than public praise or respect. It meant being accepted as the woman entitled to stand at the heart of royal tradition. When the queen consort learned that Alexandra had chosen Catherine, she did not break down. She became even more reserved. She immediately understood that the jewels had become a message, and that message had not been written in her favor. Then came the detail that changed everything. A senior palace aide, reviewing the internal inventory record before the official handover, noticed that Camilla's name had already been removed from the document. An internal inventory record is a palace document listing who is expected to access, safeguard, or review important royal possessions. That single change revealed something far colder than an emotional decision. Alexandra had not acted on impulse. Catherine recognized it immediately. Camilla would soon recognize it as well. The removed name became the first sign that this decision had been prepared long before anyone stepped into that room. And the reason behind Alexandra's certainty reached back to one private ceremony where a single moment quietly changed everything. Every royal disagreement has one moment that people later pretend never happened. This one began during a private anniversary gathering at Windsor, where one tiara, one seating arrangement, and one brief exchange turned quiet unease into lasting division. Princess Alexandra witnessed every second. Catherine sensed the atmosphere shift. Camilla attempted to shape the symbolism surrounding the event. After that day, nothing inside the royal jewel rooms ever felt quite the same again. Alexandra recognized the danger before anyone dared to mention it aloud. The Windsor Anniversary Reception, a private family gathering honoring senior royal women and royal history, was meant to preserve tradition, not expose rivalry. That mattered because these ceremonies quietly determine who is viewed as central, who is trusted with family symbols, and who slowly loses influence behind closed doors. A ceremonial rotation refers to the planned sharing of royal jewels during official occasions, and Camilla believed that her senior position beside Charles naturally entitled her to wear one of Alexandra's treasured tiaras. Before Catherine arrived, Camilla made her move. She quietly instructed a palace aide to place one of Alexandra's family-linked tiaras beside her seat. The gesture carried far greater meaning than words alone. The queen consort was not simply requesting to wear a royal jewel. She was quietly claiming a place within a legacy that had never officially been offered to her. Alexandra noticed the tiara had been moved. She watched the aide step back. And in that instant, she understood exactly what message was being sent. Without raising her voice, Alexandra calmly placed her gloves on the table and said, "That was never approved." The room instantly fell silent. Camilla heard those words, and for one frozen moment she realized the correction was not about where the tiara had been placed. It was about permission. Alexandra had drawn a firm boundary in front of witnesses, and the queen consort had been quietly stopped before the ceremony had even begun. Only moments later, Catherine entered the room and immediately sensed something had happened. She noticed the tiara beside Camilla. She saw Alexandra's composed expression. And she felt the tension building through the room like an approaching storm that no one wished to acknowledge. Catherine could have questioned what she saw. She could have stepped forward and forced the truth into the open. Instead, she chose to remain silent because she understood that royal dignity often survives only when someone refuses to turn private pain into public drama. Alexandra never forgot that decision. Several weeks later, in a documented account shared privately with a trusted courtier, she explained that the tiara had been treated like a prize instead of a responsibility. That single sentence explained everything. The collection had never been intended for the person who reached for it first. It belonged with the person willing to wait patiently, protect its meaning, and carry its history without making it personal. Camilla left that ceremony believing the moment had ended. Catherine walked away knowing something important had changed. Alexandra left with complete certainty. From that day onward, she quietly began preparing the private instruction that would eventually prevent the queen consort from gaining control of the collection. And the words, "that was never approved," remained buried for weeks until Camilla finally confronted Alexandra face to face. When Camilla entered the room, she was not searching for comfort. She wanted answers. Princess Alexandra was already seated, composed as ever, while Catherine stood quietly near the fireplace with the stillness of someone who understood that the next conversation could leave lasting scars. What followed was not a heated argument. It was something far colder. Every word was measured, controlled, and impossible to take back. Camilla pulled out a chair but remained standing. The queen consort looked directly at Alexandra, then briefly at Catherine, and the silence between the three women became almost unbearable. A private palace meeting simply means a closed discussion where those involved speak without advisors or officials guiding the conversation. That mattered because Charles was not present during this first exchange. There was no king. No husband. No protection. Only the three women whose lives had become tied to the decision standing together to face its consequences. Alexandra's expression never softened. Catherine watched the senior royal closely, understanding this was the moment when the handover would either remain an act of duty or become the beginning of open conflict. The collection had already been officially placed under Catherine's care. That mattered because once royal possessions are transferred into formal custody, reversing the emotional damage becomes far more difficult. Camilla understood that as well. She realized this was no longer a discussion about future access. The decision had already been made. Camilla finally asked the question in a slow, steady voice. Was I ever truly considered? Her voice never cracked, yet the hurt beneath those words was impossible to miss. She believed that standing beside Charles, enduring years of public scrutiny, and fulfilling her royal responsibilities had earned her acknowledgement. Alexandra heard the pain. Catherine heard it too. Yet neither woman rushed to comfort her because sympathy could not change the decision that had already been made. Trying to ease the growing tension, Catherine quietly reminded everyone that the tiaras should never become symbols of personal triumph. Alexandra responded with a single nod, as though Catherine had expressed the very reason behind her choice. But Camilla barely looked at Catherine. Her attention remained fixed on Alexandra. That single reaction revealed everything. The queen consort no longer viewed the handover as an act of responsibility. She saw it as a personal rejection. She saw Catherine holding what she believed should have belonged to her. Alexandra then revealed that a written private instruction had been placed with the collection papers. The document clearly stated that the tiaras were to remain in the care of the woman she trusted most to protect their dignity. A private instruction is a written direction attached to family property explaining how it should be cared for and who should oversee it. That mattered because it transformed personal opinion into formal authority. Camilla immediately demanded to read the instruction herself. Alexandra calmly replied that she already had. Those words landed with icy finality. For a brief moment, Catherine lowered her eyes before looking up again, fully realizing that the queen consort had not been refused by chance. She had been refused through a carefully prepared decision. The meeting ended without an apology. Camilla walked away carrying wounded pride. Alexandra remained composed. Catherine found herself standing between compassion and responsibility. But that room had forced the royal household to confront one unavoidable question. Who truly held authority over the historic tiara collection? Power inside the monarchy is not always displayed through public announcements. Sometimes it exists within a sealed instruction, a long-kept promise, or the steady judgment of someone who understands exactly what tradition allows. Charles hoped for peace. Camilla wanted acknowledgement. Catherine wanted no success that could ever be mistaken for revenge. But Princess Alexandra had already grounded her decision in something stronger than personal preference, legacy, family consent, and long-standing royal authority. Charles sat quietly at his desk with the written instruction open before him. He gently touched the edge of the document before looking toward the door, fully aware that Camilla was waiting for an answer he could never soften. A sealed instruction is a private written direction kept with important family documents explaining what must happen and who has the authority to decide it. That mattered because Alexandra's words were not casual remarks. They reflected her responsibility as the trusted guardian of the collection and confirmed her right to determine its future. Charles understood the situation immediately. The king could influence how the palace presented the handover to the public, but he could not easily overturn a decision based on Alexandra's private rights and family wishes. That mattered because reversing her choice would not only hurt Catherine, it would also weaken the authority of an older royal generation whose experience, dignity, and traditions still carried enormous weight inside the monarchy. Charles wanted harmony. But harmony now came with a cost. Catherine felt that burden more than anyone. She quietly told William that she did not want the tiaras if they became weapons dividing the family. William listened without interrupting because he understood that her concern was not fear. It was responsibility. Catherine had accepted the collection as a duty rather than a prize, and she already realized how deeply Camilla's disappointment could turn the handover into something far more painful than anyone had expected. William answered thoughtfully. He explained that refusing the collection now would make Alexandra's judgment appear uncertain, and that uncertainty would spread through the palace faster than the truth itself. The future king understood that the monarchy survives through symbols just as much as public statements. If Catherine stepped away from the collection, Camilla might appear unfairly wronged, Alexandra's judgment could seem weakened, and Charles might appear unable to protect either woman from the growing tension. Then came the confirmation that settled the matter. During a documented internal palace briefing prepared for the king, a senior advisor confirmed that once Princess Alexandra had signed the instruction, Camilla's request no longer carried any official standing. A claim, in this situation, simply meant her belief that she had a rightful place in receiving the collection. But the advisor made it clear that Alexandra's signature had already settled the issue. Charles quietly closed the file without saying a word. He knew Camilla would experience the decision as rejection rather than procedure. He knew Catherine would carry the collection with a sense of responsibility rather than celebration. And he knew Alexandra had forced the palace to choose between comfort and established authority. The decision itself was final. The emotions surrounding it were not. And once Camilla heard that answer, the palace could no longer pretend this was merely a private family disagreement. The first sign of the aftermath was not anger. It was silence. Camilla quietly withdrew from the room without raising her voice, and that silence unsettled the royal household far more than any emotional outburst could have. Catherine remained where she was, pale and visibly shaken. Charles found himself standing between personal loyalty and established tradition. Alexandra had already made her choice. Now everyone else would have to live with the emotional consequences it had created. Camilla sat alone after the door closed, resting one hand gently on the arm of her chair as Charles quietly entered the room. She slowly turned her wedding ring between her fingers, not because she felt calm, but because she needed something to steady herself while the disappointment settled more deeply. Ceremonial plans, in simple words, are the palace arrangements deciding who appears at official events, who wears particular royal pieces, and how those symbols are presented. That mattered because palace staff had already begun updating those plans to reflect Catherine's new responsibility over the historic collection. Charles recognized the impact before a single word was spoken. The king understood that palace staff had already begun revising access records, updating display arrangements, and removing Camilla's expected review from the official schedule. Access records are internal palace documents showing who is authorized to handle, oversee, or approve important royal possessions. That mattered because Alexandra's decision had now moved beyond personal preference. It had become official palace procedure. And once a procedure is put into effect, emotions alone cannot reverse it. Camilla did not ask Charles for comfort. She did not ask him to explain tradition. Instead, she quietly asked one question that changed the atmosphere completely. Did you know she was going to choose Catherine? The queen consort kept her voice steady, but the pain beneath her words was unmistakable. She was not simply asking whether he knew about the tiaras. She wanted to know whether the king had watched her walk toward disappointment without saying a word. Charles hesitated. That brief pause hurt more than any answer could have. Camilla noticed it immediately. And Charles knew she had. He wanted to deny it without hesitation. He wanted to protect both himself and her. But the truth was more complicated. He had known Alexandra had become increasingly uncertain. He had known Catherine had earned the older royal's confidence. What he had not known was that the final decision would arrive with such force. Yet somewhere inside, he had sensed it was coming. Elsewhere, Catherine carried a very different burden. She had been entrusted with the historic collection, yet she felt no triumph. She understood that Camilla's disappointment could easily become the story the public remembered, and that thought troubled her deeply. Alexandra had chosen Catherine because of her restraint. Now that same restraint demanded something beyond silence. It demanded compassion. Alexandra remained unwavering. Even so, she understood the consequences had spread far beyond the room. Her decision had protected royal legacy. But it had also wounded personal pride. The palace could revise every record, secure every jewel, and finalize every instruction. What it could never fully control were the emotions now moving through the royal family. Camilla quietly reflected on everything she had lost without speaking a single word. Charles remained beside her, fully aware that there was nothing he could do to reverse what had already happened. Meanwhile, Catherine searched for the one path that might prevent the entire situation from turning into lasting bitterness. After the difficult conversations, the written instructions, and the silence that settled once everyone had left, Catherine requested one final private meeting. No palace aides. No Charles. No Camilla. Only Catherine and Princess Alexandra sat together with years of royal history resting between them. This conversation became the true turning point because Catherine needed to understand whether she had inherited a treasured collection, an enormous responsibility, or an emotional burden. At first, Catherine remained silent. She looked toward Alexandra with the quiet concern of someone who had been entrusted with something valuable while fearing the personal cost attached to it. Public symbolism, simply explained, is the meaning people attach to royal objects, gestures, and important decisions. That mattered because the historic tiara collection could either strengthen the monarchy's image of trust or deepen the distance between Catherine and Camilla. One decision had the power to heal. Another could leave lasting scars. Alexandra understood that risk better than anyone. She gently explained that her decision had never been intended to punish Camilla. She wanted Catherine to understand that clearly. The senior royal reminded her that the collection was never meant to be treated as a prize. It was a responsibility. That distinction mattered because a prize celebrates victory, while responsibility demands humility and restraint. Catherine admitted she worried the public would believe the jewels had been taken away from the queen consort rather than entrusted to her care. Hearing those words only reassured Alexandra that she had chosen the right guardian. Catherine quietly confessed that she genuinely felt sympathy for Camilla. She acknowledged that the dispute over the collection had created tension, but pain remained pain regardless of where it fell. The princess had no desire to see the queen consort publicly embarrassed. Alexandra listened carefully before responding with calm conviction. Compassion should never become surrender when protecting a family's legacy. Catherine absorbed those words thoughtfully. They were not spoken with cruelty. They were spoken with protection in mind. Alexandra then shared that she had privately recorded her reasons for choosing Catherine. She explained that she had watched Catherine during the Windsor anniversary reception. She had seen her quietly step back when the tiara was placed near Camilla. She had watched her refuse to turn an uncomfortable moment into public drama. A family reference recording is a private record preserved so that important family decisions cannot later be misunderstood or misrepresented. That recording provided both the reason and the evidence behind Alexandra's choice. Catherine lowered her gaze before gently reaching for Alexandra's hand. She promised that the collection would be worn with care, protected with dignity, and never used as a symbol against Camilla. She understood that power displayed without restraint could easily become cruelty. Alexandra reached across the table and placed the key to the collection into Catherine's hand. Catherine slowly closed her fingers around it. She did not smile. She simply nodded. That quiet promise changed the direction of the entire crisis. Alexandra had entrusted the collection. Catherine had accepted the responsibility. And by the following morning, what had been a private royal decision had become a national story. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.